Being trusted in the workplace is hugely empowering. That feeling that someone really trusts you to do your job, it's a really powerful motivator. Now, trust has that ability to inspire us, to move us. Feeling trusted is a really wonderful feeling, and that not everyone is fortunate enough to experience in their workplace. And this isn't just an anecdote from some ivory tower academic who's never done a real day's work in their entire life. There's a fair bit of, I think, kind of widely reported data that really seems to substantiate that position that I've just described, that feeling trusted at work is incredibly powerful. So, for instance, PwC have this to say about trust, and this is based on their own surveys and experience of working with business. As they say, trust in many institutions is declining, which is why it's at a premium in business. In their fourth trust survey, the results underscore the importance and the opportunity of trust among business executives, consumers, and employees. So, there's PwC getting down to brass tacks on the fundamental importance of trust. But they don't stop there. As they go on, our data highlights an opportunity for companies to build trust with key stakeholders. Given the importance of trust, companies that understand their trust levels among employees, consumers, investors, and other stakeholders, and take a proactive approach to building it, can give themselves a clear edge over competitors. So there we have it. Generating trust among key stakeholders and staff can generate you a competitive advantage. The moral of the story seems really clear to me. Build trust to make money and make employees more content. What could be more straightforward? And that's certainly the view of 93% of the business executives in the PwC research. So, trust is good for business. I guess in some senses, what could be more obvious? Well, I think that one thing that's a bit sometimes hidden, obscured, I'm not quite sure, the downsides of trust. There's a really nice paper that's published this year that looks to try and explore some of the less positive aspects of trust. And to be clear, right, this is really important. Our everyday musings on trust, that it's really important, really positive and really valuable, really shouldn't be mistaken for hard-nosed, carefully conducted research. So if we find some research that's telling us that maybe there are some downsides too, we should absolutely look at it. So writing in the Journal of Business Research, Song et al., and I'll link to the paper below, they started from the idea that we've just looked at. There are scenarios in the workplace where we can feel like we're trusted by our leaders and managers. Normally we think that's good, but we can call that felt trust, the trust that we feel in the workplace. They then explored two different dimensions of this felt trust as it impacts employee energy and their motivation. Now, given what we've said above, it would be really natural to think that the more felt trust you have from leaders would result in employees reporting that they had greater energy to devote to their work. After all, if that felt trust is a good thing, then that might be the kind of thing that one would expect. All fine. But there was also another hypothesis that was explored by Song and colleagues. And this has a little bit darker. And this was the hypothesis that increased trust would also correlate with what they called work-to-family conflict via psychological detachment difficulty. It's a little bit of a mouthful there. But to unpack that just a little bit, suppose or imagine that you're leading a really vital project at work. It's been made clear to you that you're free to do whatever you want with the project. You are being trusted to deliver. Now, if you're being trusted to deliver, there is an important sense in which, well, the buck stops with you. The success, or indeed the failure of the project is, well, it's your responsibility. You're being trusted here. Now, of course, and I'm sure you can see where this is going, if the buck stops with you, then actually it's quite hard to detach from work at the end of the day. The fact that you're responsible will weigh on you. It will inevitably impact your thoughts during those non-work hours. And that, of course, in turn, could, well, put pressure on your non-work relationships. So those would be your relationships with friends, partners, family, and so on. So as we can see, If that hypothesis is supported, then increased felt trust from leadership, whilst it may lead to an uptick in the bottom line, could, in some circumstances, and if not well managed, also lead to a negative impact on people's wider emotional states, and ultimately also on their personal relationships. Okay, so I've outlined the conceptual space a bit there. When it comes to it, which hypotheses were in fact supported? Well, the findings were really interesting, and Song et al. Found that both hypotheses were confirmed. Greater felt trust from leadership did indeed correlate with greater energy for work, which we would expect. But it also correlated with greater work-to-family conflict. So, as Song et al. Put it, felt trust from leaders is actually therefore a double-edged sword. It's not a straightforward benefit if we're not wary about some of those downsides. And so obviously that finding is a little bit of a mixed blessing. All things being equal, greater trust in the workplace is something that we'd all naturally want to have. It really does feel like a good thing. But here we have some data that at least requires us to give that claim just a little bit of a second thought. Now, there is absolutely some definitively good news as well. Alongside these findings, Song et al. Found that one way to maximise the positive impacts of felt trust and minimise those negative impacts is to give employees what they called a higher level of job autonomy. So, for instance, employees who are able to choose tasks that match their skills and interests and are able to have the flexibility to manage their own workloads, well, those folks will fare better than their counterparts who actually lack that autonomy. Now, the data and the methods can all be found at the link below, and I really recommend taking a look at this if this kind of thing interests you, if you're in a management position where you're leading folks, because there are some really interesting insights. And personally, I find these kinds of empirical study always interesting. The main focus of my academic research is in the philosophy of trust. But I think that how we think about trust and understand its nature is of course and inevitably shaped by what we find out about trust out there in the wide world. My theory of trust has to be able to explain all of these goings on. So this is a really exciting find. And in connection with this particular study, I think it's worth reflecting on the wider fact that not all trust is wanted. So to give you a really silly example, if I'm walking down the road and suddenly someone pops out of nowhere and entrusts me with the care of their young child, perhaps they've just run out of the park and handed me a baby, I'm really not likely to respond well. I have one child already. I do not want to be trusted with the care of another. So in that kind of a case, getting more trust or trust to do more things, it's not always good. It's not always something that we should seek. And this basic point that some instances of trust are not wanted is one that has been made and explored in the wider philosophy of trust. And there's some great work by Hawley that starts to tease some of this out. For my own part, I wonder, and I'd like to research more, how much this is getting traction in the cases under discussion by Song et al. So I guess my way of framing the question would be something like, is greater felt trust wanted if it comes without the autonomy to deliver? I think that would be a really interesting question to try and pursue, both empirically and conceptually. So definitely more research for me to do. But let me know in the comments what you think we should say here. Do you think that the case I've described, that I've borrowed from Song et al., is cases of unwanted trust, or is there something else that might be going on in there? Whatever you think about that, and I look forward to finding out. I really enjoyed the paper from Song and colleagues and thoroughly recommend you take a look at it. I think it's a really important topic, and using data to understand how to best construct a workplace that allows individuals to thrive is a hugely valuable project. And so whilst there is more work to do, I think this is a great piece of work, some lovely findings, and I think right here at the end, one that perhaps we can turn to for a little bit of guidance. And so to finish with that guidance, Song et al. Note each of the following as recommendations that they think flow from their research, and I think that they're probably right. So leaders could enhance employees' sense of trust by assigning them meaningful responsibilities and reducing excessive oversight of their work. Leaders could maintain clear boundaries between work and employees' personal lives. So, for example, leaders should refrain from sending emails during weekends or outside of designated work hours. Most platforms have things like delayed send. Why not simply have everything delayed to send within core hours? Managers can also harness job autonomy to minimise the risk of felt trust, whilst also maximising its advantages. And to enhance decision-making autonomy, there are also some things that leaders can do. So, for instance, they can empower trusted employees to select tasks that align with their skills and interests, while allowing them the flexibility in managing their workloads. That was pretty much one of the findings from the research that I mentioned above, that was a way of really helping people to mitigate that worrying aspect of lots of felt trust. We can also encourage employees to experiment with different task approaches, whilst providing constructive feedback to refine their methods. In other words, let them try and find different ways through particular tasks. We can also give trusted employees the freedom to structure their work and their personal schedules. Perhaps not everyone just needs to be in the office from 9 to 5. And we can also allow employees to determine their own break times. It doesn't have to be coffee at 11 for everybody. Now, according to the data, according to the research that was done by Song et al., that's helpful advice for any manager wishing to manage trust and the autonomy in their team in order to generate happy, constructive, productive workplaces. And what's helpful for me is for you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I hope you all stay suitably trusting.